Welcome back to the UP Home Buyers Summit, and we have our next presentation here from our event sponsor, Rich Beasley from UP Home Inspection. And Rich is the owner of UP Home Inspection LLC. He is a certified home inspector through the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors. Rich holds over a dozen specialty certifications, including mold inspector, radon tester, water quality tester, indoor air consultant, and many more. Rich has decades of experience in the construction, excavation, septic system installation, water well drilling, and pest control industries. And combined with his degrees in the environmental sciences, Rich has a unique skill set that allows him to quickly assess how functionally sound a home is, but also confirm that it's a healthy environment for your family to live in. And he's also very up on the technology of home inspection. So welcome, Rich. So glad you could join us today. And all right, and so your topic, as I understand it, is telltale signs, how to tell if a home is worth the price tag. So I'm going to let you take the wheel here.
I think that's a good topic because so many people ask me at the end of an inspection, do you feel that the home is actually worth the purchase price? And that is a difficult question to answer. I can answer the questions of whether the home is sound, whether the home is safe. The purchase price, I believe, is more attuned with your realtor and, of course, the appraisers. But we can assess your level of comfort with purchasing the home. Some of the things that we think about when we walk onto a property that we can utilize to vet a home before we even ask me to come in and do the inspection. I had an inspection yesterday. The gentleman had been in 10 homes before he, found something he felt comfortable with, then had me come do the inspection to verify his thoughts. And some of the things I recommend when we're looking at homes, your first impression is usually a good one. And that's the impression of, has the home been maintained? When we look at a home that is run down, it hasn't had those maintenance component taken care of. And for me, that's a little bit different. Some people walk up to a home, they see vinyl siding, great. We have vinyl siding. They see 2 or 3 pieces of siding that have been replaced. And they say, well, there's been issues with the siding. To me, there's been maintenance on that siding. That's a different perspective. But what I want to talk about is when you walk up to your home for the first time, what are the things that you can look at to assess the home, to vet that home, to see if it's within your comfort level, and to see if you want to proceed. Home values vary so much from region to region. We listened to Frida Waara this morning talk about home values in Marquette, Ishmael, Nagani. Some of these areas, the home values are relatively high. The same home in Escanaba might be a completely different scenario. The one I was in yesterday, inspected yesterday, was $78,000. That home here in Marquette would have been $150,000. So those values are quite different regionally here in the UP. But things that we can look at when we walk up to a home. The yard, of course, is maintained. I mean, that's not a safety issue for the home structure per se, but it gives you a good indication of what you're walking into. Does it have a deck? Has the deck been maintained? Is that deck is the finish adequate? Do we have rotten timbers? Do we have missing handrails? The facets of a deck that we see on a home. The siding, of course, is the siding in good shape? Quite often we see vinyl siding where the siding has become detached from the home, or it's actually missing. Those things are good indicators of what we're seeing in the home. Not structural, not safety, but those things these are maintenance items that should be addressed. And we see exterior maintenance that's not addressed. Typically, we see that maintenance has not been carried out throughout the home during that owner's, occupancy. A couple of things. I could share a screen real quick. Some of the highlights, I think, when I look at a home are, these pictures might be a bit small. Go ahead and share this. Roofing. That's a huge ticket item here in the UP or anywhere in the United States. Do we have a new roof? Do we have a roof that's aging well? Do we have a roof that maybe 5 to 10 years of age? A architectural shingle roof like this can last 30 to 35 years if it's maintained. A 3-tab shingle, which was the older style shingles, the cheaper shingles, may last 20 or 25 years. But when we look at that roof, this roof looks fairly pristine. It's a new roof. When we look at a roof that resembles this, we see a shingle missing on the roof. Actually, underneath the shingle, you can actually see there's a board there that's exposed, which means there's no roofing felt. The roofing was attached incorrectly. This was a bad job. We can see that from the ground when we pull up to a home. We can look up, we can look at the roof, make a quick assessment of, is it aging well, or is it new, or do we have issues? Other issues we see quite often in our area is curling shingles. This is because the roof is aged. The sun has played its role on that roof and curled those shingles up. And this is not only an indicator to you that we're going to have an issue, or we have an issue with this home. Also, that's an indicator to your insurance company. Whoever the insurance provider is you choose, they're going to come out to the home and do an inspection. When they see this, this is a liability. So we want to make sure that this is something we can look at right off the bat when we walk up to a home, because the roof looks sound. Now, when I get on the roof, I'm going to look at it differently than you will. I'm going to look for granular loss. I'm going to look for cupping on the roof that you may not see from the ground. But flat roofs, we're missing a slide. Maybe we'll come back to that one. Flat roofs in particular, you cannot get on top of the roof. You're not going to see what's up there. Typically you need a ladder. Here at UP Home Inspection, we carry the ladders. I will be drone certified probably next week, it sounds like. So we'll actually be able to do aerial drone inspections of roofs and chimneys. Along with this, a little bit harder to see is the chimney. You can get on the roof, you can see that from the ground. The chimney, to see if there is issues, if we have brick that is scaling, that's falling apart, that may be obvious, but sometimes not. It doesn't quite catch your attention. The flashing on the chimney, is the chimney flashing correctly done, or is it just tar coated? Those are things that I may see that you don't, but it doesn't mean you can't look. If you look up on the roof, if something looks questionable, during the inspection, we want you to bring that out. Even pre-inspection, you can call and say, hey, we saw these items. Can you pay close attention to this? It's a strong concern of ours. We're going to address that. The heating system, of course, you walk into a home, you're doing your inspection. Do you have a heating system that looks like it's relatively new? Does it look modern? Is it clean? Is the surrounding area clean? Quite often we find issues in homes, again, where we have maintenance, where, for example, I walked into a home last year and with a wood heating system in the basement with wrapping paper stacked on top. For drying purposes, so we don't want clutter around that furnace in that area because it becomes a fire hazard. How is that mechanical room laid out? But here we can direct our attention to a clean system, something that is modern. It looks like it's been well maintained versus a system that this company actually, it's hard to tell in this photo, but the top of that boiler is actually rusted. This company actually went out of business in 1973. The furnace didn't even have a date on it. We could not age the boiler here, excuse me, not furnace, boiler. But when we look at that, you can also look at a heating system and say, wow, is the exterior of the system, is it rusted? Are the components clean? You can see fingerprints on the top of this boiler. It hasn't been dusted in years. So that tells me it hasn't been maintained. Quite often when we see a furnace, we walk into the basement, we see the furnace with the heating system, the boiler, we see a maintenance log on the front of that boiler. You can actually see the date when that boiler was last maintained, or that furnace. This to me is a strong indicator of whether we're going to have issues or not. To keep these heating systems running optimally, they have to be maintained, not just when something breaks down, but we want to go in and have that maintained every year. An astute homeowner doing it that does that is going to prolong the life of that boiler or furnace 5 to 10 years. So we want to see a maintenance log. We want to look. Of course, I opened this boiler and actually ran the boiler and looked at all the components. We looked at the firebox. We looked at everything there to make sure that it was running correctly. And of course, this one did work, but it had issues. Age being one of them, but more or less the inside of this box, we didn't show that, was rusted. It was pretty excessive. Needless to say, the buyer looked at this and said, okay, this is not a deal breaker for me, but it means we need to negotiate the price of the home in anticipation of replacing the system. And that's another thing we can address briefly. Is quite often when we see issues like a roof that is curling that we know has to be replaced, like a boiler that is aged and is not functioning optimally, and we are concerned that it is going to fail soon, that can be a negotiating tool in the purchase process, whether it's the price of the home, a reduction or replacement. And to be honest, quite often, when you look at a home inspection, to many people, they're not cheap. But when you look at a system like this and realize it's going to cost $5,000 to $8,000 to replace this boiler, the $300 to $500 you spent on your home inspection offsets that. That's well offset. Let's see if we can move on. Oh, she locked up on me there. Oh, there we go. Excuse me, we're having a little issue there.
Yeah, that's okay. So, well, you're getting that up. So a couple of things that a person can go in if they're looking for a home and just kind of self-assess a little bit. One would be the roof and look for those curled shingles, missing shingles. Another would be the just condition of the mechanical room itself, and kind of you might be able to get a feel for, does it look clean? Does it look like it's been well maintained? The average home buyer may not be able to tell exactly what's going on. You'd probably want to, definitely would want to get your home inspected before actually committing to the purchase. But since you don't want to buy an inspection for every single home you look at, usually
Right.
this will give you a good feel for kind of what might be a red flag that you might want to have inspected if it's a home that you're really interested in.
True, and that's quite often, like for example, the gentleman I inspected for yesterday, having viewed 10 homes, he vetted 10 homes. Before he found one that he was comfortable with, and that's a lot of this is comfort level. And like he said, I walked into the home and I just felt like this was the one. I'd seen so many homes that they weren't well maintained. It just didn't feel right. But now we're making sure that this home is safe for me. And he was a single dad with 4 children. I want to make sure this is going to be safe for my family. It feels good. It looks good. Now let's get to the bones of the home and find out for sure. Water heaters are a huge one. Not a high ticket item, but they can be deceiving. Some of the older systems we see, for example, the home we bought this year has a water heater that was installed in 1993. It's well aged, and it's gone well beyond its standard life expectancy. When we walk into a water utility room and we see the water heater, quite often we'll see on the top of that water heater, if it's been installed by a local plumber, they'll put the actual date of installation. And if you can spot that, that's great. It gives you an idea of when that was done and how much life is left. Modern water heaters can go 12 to 15 years. Some of the older ones we still see running. They're not running optimally, but we've seen them hit 30 and 35 years, some of you realize that you look at that water heater, you know it's aged, it's going to have issues. So some are in good condition because they've been well maintained. Example of a water heater without would question. If we're starting to see rust on water heaters, and actually I can tell you the TPR valve, I'll go home inspector, the TPR valve was done incorrectly on this one. But we're starting to see rust, and that's a condition of age. We're starting to see rusty components. For example, the gas lines coming into the system, the valving is starting to corrode. Those are things that are good indicators that the system's been around for a while. It could be a $1,500 fix. Do I feel comfortable with that? Is that something I can address myself? Is that something I want to discuss with my realtor or the seller to see if we want to negotiate that? Is that a deal breaker or not? That's something that you have to address individually. Other things that we can look at, big one here, because of the age of our homes, many of our homes were built before modern wiring. Let's just say it that way. We see 3-prong outlets in homes, modern homes all the time, and a lot of the homes that have been updated in our area. But what we're looking at here, we have a 2-prong outlet. We see those quite often. It means that we have ungrounded, aged wiring. This system, you actually had to turn the socket to put the outlet in, to put the wiring in. This one, we actually had to walk into a home that the seller decided not to replace the outlets with 3-prong outlets. They decided to just replace them with new 2-prong outlets. And that's one of the first ones I've seen done like this. That means that those outlets are ungrounded, and we would classify that as unsafe. What we want to see is if we cannot have a 2-prong outlet wired correctly, we go over to a GFCI outlet that's marked ungrounded, no equipment ground with that no equipment ground label. These are quick things that we look at. You can look at when you walk in the home, does it have 2-prong outlets? Anybody can notice that. We can put that on a checklist and say, does it have 2-prong outlets? If it does, we know we have dated wiring. And that means that we are going to want to either replace that with the correct outlet or update the wiring altogether. Now, what you don't see, and I do, is when I look at the bones of the home, I'll open the electrical panel and I'll look inside and see what's there. Is that wiring done correctly? And we didn't give an example because every box is different. Is the wiring done correctly? Is the electrical box and the outlets, are those all bounded and grounded? Are these things done correctly? You can come into the home and this can be, hey, 2-prong outlets means we need to do some updating. That's going to add cost to the purchase. Either reduce the purchase price or cost to you in the long run. I look at it from the worm's eye view. I go straight into that electrical box and do an assessment. So if you walk into a home, you see 2-prong outlets, you grew up in a house with 2-prong outlets, you have never had an issue with it, that may be within your comfort zone. And then when you bring me into the inspection, I assess the wiring and see what we have to do to make those safe. For somebody that was raised in a modern home with 3-prong outlets, they see this and they go, what is this? Now we can use that as a tool to assess our comfort level. That's the end of those. Let me just go back to the screen. And Ona, you might want to give me a pointer on this one. All right, can you hear me, Ona?
Sorry. Yeah, if you go down to the bottom where it says share screen and just hit that button there. Let me see if I can do it from the panel. And Esther, if you're still on, if you can.
We can leave this up, that's fine.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, we'll work on it. Many of the things that we see that, you talk about the price of the home. Is this something that, is going to meet my standard? Is a big issue. But for me, and I want to interject here if you have questions or you want to direct. That outward appearance of the home is so vital. If you know your budget is screaming that we need a fixer-upper, at what level do you feel comfortable with repairs? And I think that's one of the things that we address quite well is when we come into a home, I enjoy doing my inspections with the buyer for the simple reason that we can educate the buyer along the way. We can see a two-prong outlet. I can pull up an image and say, okay, this is a two-prong outlet. This is what we want to convert that to. Now, do you feel comfortable? Are you handy enough to do these on your own and save money? Or do you need an electrician to do this? For example, we had a roof last week that the roof of the garage was sagging excessively. It was poorly framed. It was a home built in the 1960s. We went up and assessed the attic. We assessed the framing. And the gentleman that I was inspecting for informed me that he was a journeyman carpenter, that he could frame that garage in an afternoon. He could do the roof repairs. He felt very comfortable with that. Someone else, we need to discuss what is going to be the approach. Are you going to hire a roofing contractor to come in and do this? Do you have a relative that can do this? Do you want the buyer to tackle this? Those are negotiating tools that you discuss with your realtor. What's your level of comfort? We hit that first. We look at a couple things. We look at the structure of the home. Let's make sure the home is structurally sound. Next, we look at the safety of the home. That's an entirely different issue. The home can be structurally sound and can be unsafe. So when we're talking about safety issues, we're looking at, does the home have proper wiring? Is the plumbing done correctly? Plumbing and wiring do not mix. So plumbing and electricity, bad combination. If we have, I didn't show this picture today, about a month ago, I had a home where somebody had plumbed a copper line on an exterior basement wall in front of the electrical panel. You could open the electrical panel about 4 inches and you're touching a copper line. If that line were to rupture, now we're spraying water on an electrical panel. Do we have ground fault outlets? Those are safety concerns. If we have water, we need a GFCI outlet. We need ground faulting. Well, we're starting to see them more in Michigan. We're starting to see arc fault outlets where we have arc fault circuit interrupters is what they're called. Arc faulting is one of the leading causes of fire in the United States. The breakers and the outlets aren't required in Michigan, but if we have a situation where they're needed, I think that is something we discuss with the buyer. It's an added level of security. Other things that we discuss up here are radon. Safe homes. Do we want to test for radon? We're seeing radon in 1 in 15 homes in Upper Michigan. So, that's not a deal breaker because we can come into the home. You've assessed the home. You love the home. Let's test for radon. Let's have the water tested. Let's test the septic. Make sure those things work. If we have high radon, we can mitigate. We don't do it ourselves. I feel that's a conflict of interest. But there are other companies in the area that come and put radon mitigation systems in. But we want to assess the structure and the safety. Those are key elements in a home purchase. I think Frida Waara put it quite adeptly earlier that your home is going to change over time. The home you have today will not be the home you have in 10 years. So can we address the scare of purchasing a home, which Thomas addressed, but adeptly also that this is a scary process. For many, this is the first time they've bought a home. So Thomas said, this brings a lot of anxiety. Can we bring this home that you're looking at, can we get it to a point that it's comfortable for you to make the purchase, knowing what you need to address in the future? You may not see those things when you walk up to the home, but your gut feeling is going to tell you that, hey, this one is within my comfort zone. Now let's see what we really have to do. And I think that's where we come in very well. That's where your home inspector is going to help you address those concerns that you have, those inklings that something may be wrong. and then point out those things that you may not have thought of. I wish we had the one image of the flat roof. We found one this past summer that had been tarred at least a dozen times and was cracked and blistered. And there's a little water stain in the entryway. And the buyer actually asked, he said, "What's that water stain from?" So I showed him a picture of the roof, and it's like, oh, we couldn't see that from the ground, but now we can. Attics are a huge thing in the UP. Once they're accessible, we have all these 100-year-old chimneys, and quite often we see the structure of the chimney in the attic is quite different from what we see on the outside of the home. So getting in that attic and being out there and taking a picture and be able to show that to the homeowner that, hey, we got witch's crook up in this chimney. That's kind of a neat facet that you don't see often, but it is solid. Those things that add nuances to the home also come out in an inspection. And to me, I think take this back to Frida. So many of those we see are DIY repairs, home improvements that we've watched a television show, and we want to do that to our home. We may not have done it correctly, but they had good intentions. We find those all the time that kind of, how do I want to put this? They're not done right. They look good, they're cosmetic, and they can hide defects. So let's go that route, which even I will see as an inspector that you might not see when you walk into the home. But these DIY channels bring us so many wonderful ideas. And so often I think folks walk into a home, buyers walk into the home expecting the home to look like their dream home on the DIY networks. And what we can help, I believe, with is showing how that we can make the bones of the home correct and evolve that home into something that they would be proud of, something that they have seen on the DIY networks, and get them there from point A to point B correctly, and give those points of view that they need. Flippers, bless them, we have the term flipper now. People that buy homes and do the repairs and flip. Sometimes they're not the expert, and they may skip a corner or two that they don't realize they've done. Not intentionally. I think it's quite often done because they don't have a skill set they're trying to, absorb from YouTube or what have you. We coined this phrase that there's a 14-year-old on YouTube that can teach you how to do anything, but they might not teach you how to do it correctly. So we see a lot of that, and things look cosmetically, they're beautiful when we walk into them. It makes you feel good. You get that cookies in the oven feel. That's when we really come into play to see that, hey, somebody didn't wire an electrical box correctly. This needs to be repaired. But the topic I know is that we want to, how do we assess a home before we bring the inspector in? And those are the nuances. I think age, we can assess a home for aging items. Cleanliness and maintenance are huge, because if the home isn't well maintained, it means the systems haven't been well maintained. If there isn't a pride of ownership, I think that's a term that should be utilized more often, that a home, our level of pride in that ownership and its repair. Is it a lack of pride and ownership, or is it simply the age of the home? That's big here. I inspected a home 3 weeks ago that was built in 1872. Well, some of the facets of that home from the 40s and 50s were still there in the electrical systems and in the plumbing. They were hidden, but the home felt good when you walked in. And that's what drew that buyer in. And I think that's, look at the exterior, spin yourself around, look at the home, and see what aged components are there. Check a few windows. It's such a simple thing to do, to walk up to a window, flip a latch, and raise and lower a window. Ask permission, but see what the windows are made of. Are they wood windows? Are they vinyl windows? Are they aluminum windows? What are they made of? And do they function? Just try a few, see if they function well. That'll give you an indicator that, hey, the rest of the windows are maybe okay, they may not, but it's a good indicator that, hey, we might not have to replace windows in this home, or, this one's thick, it's been painted shut, they're probably vintage, they're single pane windows. That's could be several $1,000s. Do we want to tackle that or not? Is that within our comfort level? Again, that comfort level comes out so much during inspections. I felt comfortable with the home. Now we need to know where to go from here. And the other thing I think you need to play into, if you're buying a for sale by owner, talk to that owner and see if there's a maintenance log for the home. What have they done? What have they repaired on the home? What have they not repaired on the home? I mean, that's huge. The owner will tell you, we had the roof replaced 5 years ago by this company. Now we know that we've got a relatively new roof. The owner says, hey, we've been here for 15 years. We've never replaced the roof. We don't know when it was replaced. Now that's something that's may take you out of your comfort zone a little bit. And we need to look into water heaters. I can't tell you how many homes I've walked into that the seller looks at me and goes, I just replaced the water heater 2 years ago. That if they are willing to give that information up, it gives you a better foundation in making your decisions if we know when the components were installed in the home. But yes, I think that some of the things that we look at are off-putting are, for example, cracked driveways. We have so much heaving here in the UP with the frost line. Freezing, thawing. We see cracked driveways all the time. That's usually cosmetic. But so many buyers will look at a cracked driveway and see that, oh, wow, and they associate that crack in the driveway with the state of the home. That's not necessarily true. We have spalling and cracking all the time because of our conditions here. Now that's a crack in the foundation wall. That's another story, and you can often see that. Walk around the home, look at the foundation, look for cracks as you walk the home. And we say to do all this, but the typical viewing a home is 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the most. It's a lot to pack in. But those big ticket items are going to be your roof, the siding, mechanical systems, discerning whether they're corroding or not, whether they're dirty or not. Just kind of give that good visual. And two-prong outlets are not necessarily a killer on a home, but they're an indicator of the age of the wiring in the home and the possible need for a serious update there. But is there anything that you want to interject?
What I'm hearing a lot is that, when you're going into a home, we all want to go in and we all, like somebody said about cookies in the oven feel, and that can really hit us right away. But a lot of that can be really cosmetic. And what I'm hearing is that it's a really great idea if you're viewing a home to just sort of put on the x-ray glasses a little bit and look beyond the paint and the carpet, because those are the easy things that are easy to fix. This is what I'm hearing from kind of between the lines of what you've been saying, things like the cracks in the driveway that you mentioned, and how easy is that to fix versus maybe a crack in the foundation?
True. The foundation work's huge. Style in a home. I hear realtors say this all the time, that, well, they didn't like the style of the home. Style changes. Carpeting changes, flooring changes. We want to really look at what that structure is all about. And then, the style can come later. I come into it with the concept that I make sure the home is safe. You make the home your home as you move forward, because we're going to change things. Even in this home, there's been things changed, I'm sure, multiple times. We could walk through this home and see 7 different types of wall paneling in this house. So every little addition came with some nuance and new idea. And it's fabulous to be able to do that, but we just need to address the structure, the underlying structure, and the safety issues. The other things I often talk about in, let's say, for example, Marquette or Ishmael, where we have homes so close together. You get this feel when you walk between 2 homes that your shoulders are going to touch. What's happening with the snow that's coming off those 2 roofs and the ice? Where's it going to? How are you addressing those issues? And that's something we think about in the wintertime here. We think about ice damming. We think about, oh, wow, there's snowbanks. When they plow, they push it against the home. But those are the things that we don't think about in the summertime. Our mind goes to green grass and flowers and nice shrubs and that big oak, that big maple tree in the backyard, but we don't think, where are we going to put the snow at? And that's one of the questions we often ask is, okay, where could we have ice damming issues, melt issues, and snow issues? And how do those, there, somebody's coming to play. Anyway, our cat is here. Yeah, those are some of the issues that that we address also is literally I've seen homes in Marquette, one recently that the neighbor's siding was collapsed from all the ice coming off the home that was for sale, hitting the neighbor's home. So we don't always just look at the home, but look around the home and see what other issues might be a liability. And that would definitely be a liability. It was easier to conquer with a few snow guards on the roof that could solve that. But we're going to look to address that also. But snow placement is so vital up here. We have so many wet basements and crawl spaces in the springtime. Snow placement can mitigate so much of that. So while you're going and looking at these homes, not only do you want to look at the home itself, look at the grounds and ask yourself, where am I putting snow? Do I have enough lot to put the snow on to move it? Quite often we have folks that are coming up from, like Frida pointed out, from out of state that are looking to buy their dream property in the UP, and they're not used to having 200 inches of snow a year. So that's kind of something we point out during inspections is, wow, it's a beautiful home, beautiful piece of property. Where are you putting the snow? And who's going to maintain that snow? I think that's something that Thomas brought up, is as we have those retirement years, who's going to maintain the snow and how? So that comes into play with all of this. Yeah, there are so many nuances to this. To say, hey, this is just here's a bare bones guide to vetting a home. There is just so much.
What might be some of the other things, like you mentioned, snow removal and snow, where you're going to put it? Any other things that come up specifically for the UP housing stock, which has its unique aspects to it?
Okay, with the UP housing stock, some of the things that come up with our aging homes, it's ice damming. We have a huge issue with ice damming. And that is due primarily to attic ventilation. It's a combination of attic ventilation and insulation. In these older homes, wood was cheap, coal was cheap, gas was cheap. Those fuel sources were cheap. They didn't insulate well, partially because of the cost of fuels, but also because of the technologies that were there. We didn't have blown glass insulation in 1915. We had lath and plaster that covered up a lot of air spaces that were never insulated. So when we look at this, for example, when I go into an attic, I look down into the eaves to see if, from the attic down, to see if there's been water staining. That's going to be an indicator in the summertime that we've had ice damming there. Now, if I can get to the attic space, that is. Some of them we can't. We look for water damage on the eaves and other things to give us some indications. But insulation is huge up here. I was in a farmhouse last week doing an inspection that had no attic insulation. And the gentleman had been raised in the home. He said, we wondered why we had so much ice damming on the sides of the house. We're keeping the home at 68 degrees in the wintertime. It's melting snow. It runs to the edges and it freezes right there. He said, it was great as a child. We had 12-foot icicles hanging off the side of the house. It was a playground. But that tells me that you're losing so much in the way of heat. And with modern insulation, we've gone from, hey, an R19 in the attic is pretty good. Oh, wow, you got an R28, 38, you got an R48. Now they're looking at R60 in the attic. Our fuel costs keep going up. So the more we can insulate, and that's something we bring out, is when we look in there, in that attic space, we look at, hey, you only have an R13 up there. You're going to need to substantially upgrade your insulation. Is it costly? 1,500 square foot house, you might get away with, if you insulate it yourself, $1,200, but still that's an expense you're going to incur. If you don't, something that Ryan pointed out with the refinancing of a home and saving on that interest if you up your insulation, that insulation could pay for itself in a year or two in saved fuel expenses. So we're going to look at that. And that's one of those things that you see in Upper Peninsula homes all the time. The other thing we see up here is the foundations. We have a lot of cobblestone foundations, sandstone foundations. We run into poured concrete. We run into concrete masonry units or concrete blocks. We run into such a wealth of a variety of foundation types. Sandstone is prevalent we see a lot of Marquette along with cobble. Sandstone, if it's not maintained, starts to deteriorate over time, and that requires parge coatings and ceilings, what have you. So if you walk out, you see a beautiful sandstone foundation wall, we need to know that that has to be maintained. Quite often they're exposed. Sometimes they've been painted, but you'll see that sandstone start to wear away and it starts to flake. And we know it's time for some sealing and some parge coating to protect that. And they're wonderful. They're beautiful foundations. We see some of our historic buildings are sandstone structures. They can weather a lot of time, but they need to be maintained. Other things that we see here in particular, a lot of framing issues with turn of the century framing, and that's the last century, not this century. Timbers that have developed dry rot, they may never have seen moisture in 100 years, but they're starting to develop dry rot, and that's something we can point out and look to address. A lot of the homes we have here were mine houses that may not have true foundations. We've seen that where they're sitting on wooden piers that are sitting on a concrete pad, and they shift over time. So we've seen several of those over this last 2 years. So those issues with the vintage of our homes are things that we call out as not being up to modern standards or new age standards, but they have worked well for 100 years. Do they need to be upgraded? Maybe not, but we look to address that if it's necessary. There's just so much. It's an amazing job to be a home inspector. You get to see so many people, and you get to help them realize some of their dreams and analyze some of their fears at the same time. And you get to play Inspector Gadget and find those things that are hidden in the home, and not always the bad things. There are so many good things that we can bring out in our homes. That those vintage parquet floors that we see in some of the homes in Marquette that were laid by hand weren't created out of laminate or vinyl. Someone sat there and spent days laying out a parquet floor in a living room, or these intricate wood tilings. And we have some fantastic homes here.
We have.
They are beautiful. But with that comes the maintenance issues. These big wooden columns that we see on our front porches in some of the homes in Marquette need to be maintained. And the homebuyer needs to realize that they're beautiful, but there's a maintenance schedule that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, for sure.
Siding is such a big thing up here because we had clapboard siding. That has to be maintained over time. That means we're going to be painting that home, scraping it down, painting it periodically. And when we do that, we need to address any rot issues that may have formed. And it's a beautiful place to be, and the homes are all unique.
Beautiful.
We need to address that.
I'm gonna just open it up to questions. I know Mickey says great info for looking at a home and things to look for. I don't know if anybody's got questions for Rich. This would be the time to ask. And if not, I think we've got a couple minutes. Anybody have questions for Rich? And if not, if you could just address real quick, like the value of a home inspection, because this is something you were telling me that the other day that a client was expressing to you.
Okay, the value of a home inspection to me is in the savings, safety and savings. When we look at a home inspection, yes, you're going to pay the cost. They average with just a straight home inspection, none of the ancillary products like radon testing and all that. They average around $350 here in our area. Now, for example, we looked at boilers earlier. Now, that replacement cost in a boiler is $5,000 to $8,000. By us pointing those things out that you can negotiate in the purchase price, or you can negotiate repairs, that quickly offsets the cost of a home inspection. Adding ground fault outlets to a room or to your bathrooms could easily cost as much as the inspection itself. So that offsets that cost. And that's what we look to do, not only to give you peace of mind, but just to give you enough value that you've got your good bang for your buck in the home inspection, so that you can assess those values and recoup some of those expenses before they occur. I was in a home the other day that we found that the air induction fan blower motor was starting to squeal. It means the bearings are going. It probably wouldn't make it another 3 months. About 2 months after the purchase would go through, we'd be replacing a $500 motor on a furnace. That would completely offset the cost of an inspection. And that's kind of how I look at it, is the value is there through us finding those issues that can be repaired before you take ownership. So.
Right, and giving you the peace of mind of knowing, well, okay, that I know what I'm dealing with now, and
Exactly.
budget for it, I can, kind of have an idea of what I'm dealing with. Okay, so thank you so much, Rich. This has been incredibly informative. And if anybody has questions, we're kind of out of time here for this session, but if you want to reach out to Rich and have questions, Rich, how do they reach you?
Well, they can call me at 906-360-3879, or they can email me at www.uphomeinspection.com or rich@uphomeinspection.com. And for those that want to schedule inspections, we actually have online scheduling on the website. So it is synced with my personal schedule on my cell phone. So if you schedule an inspection, I know it happens, and we can start the conversation from there, or you can call me and schedule an inspection or ask questions. And they're always open to questions. We have home buyers that contact us all the time, asking simple questions about the homes that they're looking at, trying to get to that comfort level. And we are more than happy to answer those.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and sign off of this session. If you can join us at the top of the hour, we have another great presentation coming up. This is from Stephanie Jones, Associate Realtor at Select Realty, and she is an expert. Actually, she's a real estate educator, the only one in the UP, and her topic is, what do you mean a realtor has ethics? What every Michigan home buyer and seller should know about real estate ethics. Like, this is a really important topic. So stay tuned. We're going to sign off of this live, and we're going to start another one right at 1 o'clock. So thank you again, Rich, and we'll catch everybody again real soon.